Okay, we're looking at the Evan Shelaima, Perek Vav, and Perek Vav is about chinuch, training your children in the right way, and teichacha, the idea of giving musar when you see somebody doing something wrong. So one of the things that the Vilna Gaon emphasized, and again this is repeated many times in the small Perek, is that when you give tochacha, when you give criticism, when you try to be madrich your children, or anybody, but the main focus in the Perek is on your children, you have to do it in a very, very gentle way. So even though, for example, Shlomo HaMelech mentions, Chosech Shiftei Seinei B'nai, he who spares the stick, meaning he doesn't use the stick, hates his child, supposed to give him discipline. The Gra explains that does not mean literally to physically hit the person, but it means you have to have boundaries, you have to have discipline, you have to have gavul, and it should never be like abuse, it should never be out of anger. I think I had mentioned to you the story with the Basna Rebbe that his father would hit him, but his father always waited 24 hours after the misbehavior because his father didn't want to hit his child because he was upset. He wanted to do so because he determined when he was calm and collected that this is the best way to deal with your child. Now, even if, as Rav Wolbe says, a modern parent bichlal shouldn't hit your child. So let's just translate it into other things. So good. So we don't do hitting today, Beseder. But we yell, we raise our voice, we put restrictions, we do punishments. But it's very, very important that on one hand that's important. It is important. But it shouldn't be because you're upset, you're angry, you're mad. It should be because you think that this is the best thing that my child needs. So that's why you take a little bit of time, maybe not 24 hours, that's a long time, but take a little bit of time to think about what the best way of dealing with the situation is. Now, I think I had mentioned, too, an interesting yesod that is not brought up here. That is, you got to choose, I'm really talking to a parent here, or a Rebbe, that you have to choose your battles, meaning you can't make a big deal over every little thing, because then, number one, you have a million things, and number two, the kid is going to shut off. I mean, if every second there's this wrong, and that wrong, and that wrong, and that wrong, and that wrong, they'll stop listening. So you have to know that some things are ikr, and you have to be focused on them, and some things are not so ikr. So one of the tests that they give is this something that this kid is going to be doing 20 years from now? So let's assume that you have a child who likes to run around, and he stands on the table. Okay, so the time would be, listen, if he does it when he's 3 years old, he's not going to do it when he's 13 years old. He's not going to stand on the table. So things that people grow out of naturally, it's not always good to make a big thing. Masha'en came things like lying, stealing, being angry, being abusive towards people. Those are things that unfortunately someone can acquire those mitos, and that could stay with them. So those are the things you have to fight about. I think I mentioned the Chafetz Chaim's daughter used to say that her father was not makbid on inyanim of kavod. So, for example, she sat in his chair. He didn't really care. But if she told a lie or whatever it would be, that was something he took very, very seriously. Because that's a midah that a person is margil themselves in, and that remains. See, that's the negative. Everyone knows the famous pasuk, Chanoch l'nar al pi darko. Train a child according to his derech, and even when he's old, he will not depart from it. So we always understand that in the positive way, as indeed the Gra does, meaning everybody has a special derech, and you got to work with your child's personality. But it also has a negative component, meaning if you let a child simply follow his derech in a bad way, then when he's old, he's going to be that way too. In other words, things don't fix themselves automatically. So some things do. A kid can't sit at a Shabbos table, a kid runs around, a kid climbs a tree. I think I mentioned you of Chaim Kanievsky and the Chazon Ish, that as a boy he was climbing trees and the stipler was so embarrassed. And the Chazon Ish says, let him climb trees. That's what kids do. Even I used to climb trees. I can't believe it, but yeah. So the thing is, people grow out of things. So why do I have to make a fuss about things that, are not going to be nogea l'maisa a few years from now? But things that are nogea l'maisa, about midos and honesty and sheker and anger, those are things that they can become entrenched in a person's personality, and you have to work on it. But when you work on it, so number one, you choose your battles, but number two, when you work on it in a gentle way. It should not be a harsh way. Again, lahavdil, I don't want to compare children to dogs, but every good dog trainer will tell you that a dog responds more to kindness, discipline, firmness, but done in a kind way, and not through hitting and not through beating or whatever it would be. So kal v'chomer, a human being is going to be the same way. Okay. Yeah. So now we're up to Sif Vav, in Perek Vav, Sif Vav. And he says, now this is an interesting point, Ma sheha'adam medakdek b'limudo, mayel l'tikun hamidais. Now this may be hard for a younger child, but it's a general rule, and this applies to adults, applies to us. If a person is medakdek, if a person is very careful, meticulous in his learning, meaning when he learns, he works hard to try to understand every detail. Doesn't try to skip, doesn't try to be superficial. He wants to understand, he's medakdek. He looks at his learning very carefully. So the Gra says that will help him repair his midais, his character traits, and his maisim tovim, and his good deeds. Now, this is a very interesting statement because you wouldn't automatically assume that. What does he mean? He said, being medakdek b'limud helps a person to have midos tovos and maisim tovim. Midos and maisim. Now, one answer might just be, the simplest answer might just be that's the kayach of Torah. The kayach of Torah connects you to Hashem, so it elevates you, it purifies you. So memela, I learned Torah, I learned Bava Kama, I learned Bava Metzia, I learned Kiddushin. It's going to work on my midas. Now, let me just remind you that there is a thought that the Gra said that's brought down in Perek Aleph that may sound a little bit the opposite. Remember the famous thing, I think we've learned it more than once, where the Gra says that Torah is compared to water. Everyone knows that. Torah is like water. And there are a lot of reasons. Water purifies you. Water is necessary for life. Water goes from high ground to low ground. So the Torah leaves the arrogant and goes to the humble. But the Gra said an amazing chiddush. He says Torah is like water because water has a koach that whatever you pour it on, it causes growth. So you pour the water on wheat seeds, you get wheat. You pour the water on poison ivy, or weeds, or dandelions, you'll get weeds. In other words, water has a kayach to be matzmiach, whatever it comes in contact with. So says the Vilna Gaon, if you are a person with good midos, kindness and compassion, and rachmanos, the Torah is going to make you better and better and better. Those midos are going to get strengthened. That's not controversial. Yeah, we would all say that. But the chiddush is the other part. If chas v'shalayim, a person is filled with gaiva and arrogance, selfishness, not only will the Torah not make him better, but chas v'shalayim, the Torah theoretically could make him worse. And that's the meaning of the statement of Chazal, that sometimes you learn Torah, it's a sam of chayim, it's a medicine of life. And sometimes learning the Torah could be called a sam maves, a medicine of death, poison. So if a person is a Baal Gaiva, learning will make him more of a Baal Gaiva because he'll be successful, he'll be smarter than other people, he thinks, and therefore, the Torah itself can give him another avenue to be conceited. That's why the Vilna Gaon wrote that you have to combine the learning of Torah with Musar, with working on Midos. Because otherwise, it's like planting a field but having a lot of weeds. What do? Weeds choke and destroy the plants that are growing. And it's funny, I think about this, dandelions. I don't see a lot of dandelions in Israel, I don't know, but dandelions, those yellow things. So they're pretty, right? I mean, they look like pretty flowers. But really, they're weeds that destroy everything that's growing there. So that's the Yetzer Hara, right? That's the Yetzer Hara. I mean, it looks really pretty, looks really, really nice. But if you're not oiker it, if you don't uproot it, it can destroy everything that's there. That's how midos work. So I'm just thinking out loud, a little bit of a contradiction here, because here, what we just read now is that dikduk in learning Torah helps to improve your midos. And yet we learned before the idea that Torah is like water, so if you have bad midos, the Torah makes it worse. So which is it? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? But I think we obviously have to be mechalik, and that is, if a person learns Torah but also is consciously working on his midos, the Torah will be like a booster system that will improve it'll give him more accomplishment in that. Meaning, if I learn the Torah and I don't connect it to building my character, it might even make me worse. But if I look at my learning Torah as part of a total avodah to try to make me a better person, then fakert, the koyach of the Torah, will take your efforts and magnify them. Right? So I don't think it's a stira. I think we would just be mechalek between a person who learns Torah just as a purely intellectual exercise versus a person who learns Torah because he wants kirvas elokim, he wants to be closer to God, and that requires tikkun hamidos, as the Rambam writes. Bad midos are like a mechitza. It's a beautiful evocative phrase. He says, the midos in a person that are not good are like a wall, a mechitza, a separation between you and Hashem. The more bad midos, the more walls there are. The more we improve our midos, we remove the walls. Okay? And the Gemara says that learning itself has that tremendous kayach to be misakin the midas. Now, Rav Yisrael Salanter said another aspect of this, which in one way is maybe a little more limited. He focused on the idea of learning the halachos in interpersonal behavior. In other words, let's say bein adam l'chavei. When we think of midos, usually, although it's not only that, but usually when we think of midos, it's in the realm of bein adam l'chaveiro, interpersonal behavior. I have rachamim, I have compassion, I don't get angry at people, I try to be generous, I try to be caring. No say behold, if somebody is suffering, I try to have empathy. Empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy is I have mercy for you. Empathy is I feel your pain. It's a higher level. That's called no say behold, es chavere. So those are called midos tovos. So Yisrael Salanter suggested that when a person bedavka learns the halachos that pertain to these areas, that raises their sensitivity. So, for example, when I learn the laws of gezel, so that makes me very sensitive to all types of theft. Not only stealing your money, but stealing your time, ginevas zman, stealing your das, meaning lying to you or misrepresenting, stealing your sleep. So Yisrael Salanter actually held that iyun in the halachos of bein adam l'chaveiro gives a person greater sensitivity towards it. Now, I'm not sure. The Gra might be saying that here, but it's not mashma that way, because here the Gra seems to be mashma that anything that you're learning will be misaka in your midos, even if it's not directly nogeya that particular subject. And this is something people don't always understand. I mean, people say, especially in Ohr Somayach, let's say you have a newcomer who never learns Gemara before. So he comes in, he's so excited, he's coming to Ohr Somayach or any yeshiva. He wants to know the purpose of his life. He wants to know how to serve God. He wants to know why he's here. And he was told that although everything is in the Torah, it's really the Talmud, the Gemara, that explains everything. So he's so excited, he sits down for his first day. Gemara, the key to life, the key to wisdom, the key to everything. And maybe you've had this experience. So the Gemara gets opened, and all of a sudden we're talking about, two guys holding onto a talus, or an egg, a chicken lays an egg on Shabbos, and maybe the person enjoys it, maybe not. If he's like a legal mind, he'll enjoy the back and forth argument. But lurking in his mind, maybe in the front of his mind, is, how is this making me closer to God? What's going on here? I mean, I'm learning these technicalities, and I'm learning these debates. Okay, this and that. Now, okay, it happens to be, we also have Shiurim and Derech Hashem and other things, okay. But we have to admit to ourselves that all that other stuff is a minor percentage. I mean, basically, a yeshiva curriculum is Gemara with a few additional things. So Ohr Somayach has, let's say, a few more additional things than maybe other yeshivas. But there's no question, Gemara is the bread and butter and meat or whatever it is of our diet here. And the question is, what is that doing for me exactly? So rationally, you can't really explain it. You really can't explain it rationally. But there is an idea, this is what the Gemara is saying, that the yagia in Torah, the work, the toil, in Yiddish, the word is harvanya. The yagia in Torah, the hard work in Torah, breaking your head, somehow refines your midos. Again, only if you have the right kavanah. And on one hand, we have the Gra in Perek Aleph, that the Torah is like water, can make you worse. But if a person is doing it with sincerity and he wants to become a better person, I'm learning Bava Kama, I'm learning Bava Metzia, I'm learning Kedushin, I'm learning Gittin, I'm learning, right? How much of the Gemara is about dishonest people? Anyway, right? Half the cases, in Bava Metzia, about this cheater and that trick and that trick. So what am I doing? I'm learning about Ganavim, like how to cheat, how to rob, how to steal. But the answer is, if you're doing it in the context of Torah, the koach of the Torah improves your midas. Amazing thing. This is what he says. He says to be medakdek. Now, medakdek is not superficial learning. Medakdek is to be very careful and meticulous. Being medayek in Torah will actually help your midas. And this, by the way, was a key issue in which, let's say, the Gra and Rav Chaim of Volozhin were emphasizing in Akuda that in early Hasidus there may have been an inclination in the other direction, meaning in early Hasidus, again, I'm not attributing this to the Baal Shem Tov, but to some followers and the like, there was an idea that this kind of theoretical learning that's not directly focusing on loving God or fearing God was not worth very much. Like, why should I learn about this machlokas and that machlokas? How is it connecting me to Hashem? And therefore they kind of de-emphasized it. And the Gra is coming back, and this is one of the many reasons. Now, it's a complicated issue. What did the Gra have against Hasidim? Okay, that's a very complicated issue. And it's even more complicated because Chaim Volozhiner, who was so close to the Vilna Gaon, may not have even had the same shita. It's a rare case of the Talmud maybe differing with his Rebbe a little bit, although he never said it. He would never say it in that way. But their argument was that all of these pilpels and all of these debates and all of these discussions are not focusing on loving Hashem, fearing Hashem, midos tovos. So let's kind of forget about it. So the Gra is saying a chiddush here. The Gra is saying a chiddush that you have to know that all of that learning refines you, purifies you, connects you to Hashem, and it can actually have a ripple effect of midos tovos. Essentially, that's the claim of the yeshiva world, coming from the Gra and Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Is it empirically true? Well, you do have a problem, but that problem was identified in Perek Aleph, that sometimes the Torah can backfire if a person doesn't have the right attitude. Or, as somebody once told me in Lakewood, he said, well, the question is, people learn and have bad midos. How do you explain that? Right? So the guy just said, well, without the Torah, he would have been worse, that's all. Meaning, yeah, there's no claim here that the Torah is going to make you a tzaddik. It says the Torah will improve you. All right. So a guy learns and he's a rotten guy. Okay, he would have been more rotten without it. So the Torah still. So you can't taina. There's still some progress that was made in this. Okay. Now then he goes on and says, "V'kol shekain ima adam makdim lilmod biyaldusei." And this is the old idea that called girsa, in Aramaic it's called girsa diankusa, the learning when you're young. Because it's all connected, because it is easier to change midos when you're young than when you're old. Because when you're old, it's so habitual already. So he tells us that if the idea is that Torah is a medium to improve our midos, that itself would be a special benefit of learning Torah when you're young, because then you're able to work on those midos at a time when you're still able to change them. It's very, very hard to change midos. Very, very hard. Rabbi Somayach famously said that it is more difficult to change one midah from bad to good than to learn all of Shas. Learning all of Shas is not easy. That's a big achievement. Baruch Hashem, we have Talmidim in this yeshiva that have actually done it. But very, very big achievement. Rabbi Somayach says to change one midah is a greater achievement, a harder achievement than learning all of Shas. So when you start young, that can help you a lot in Tikkun Hamidais. And then that'll help you when you get older. Ve'al zeh amru, and this is an expression, Chaveirav rotzin acharav v'ein magian oisai. Yeah. So this is an interesting expression. This is based on a Gemara in Bava Kama. So let me just read you the Gemara. It's in the footnote here. Shisen rehite rohit, v'lo matu legavra demitzafra karich. Now, the simple meaning of the Gemara is, it's only talking about eating a good breakfast, right? When you grow up, right, you were told, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, breakfast. So it mentions, the Gemara says, 60 runners will run after a person who ate a good breakfast and they won't be able to reach him. Meaning you're, energetic, ready for the day. So, the Gemara's Pashup Pshat is talking about the importance of eating a breakfast. That's true. But the Gemara has an allegorical interpretation. So it's interesting. See, the Even Shelaima just gives statements, and it doesn't really say how the Gemara is reinterpreting a Gemara in an unusual way. And that is the following. The Torah itself is compared to bread. It's compared to water, but it's also compared to bread. The morning of life is when you're young. The evening of life is when you're older. So when it says, he who eats his bread in the morning will be able to beat even 60 people running after him. Allegorically, metaphorically, means the person who learns Torah when he's young will be so much superior to other people who have not done that practice in terms of his midos, in terms of his hanhaga. You see? So it's a chiddush. He's kind of reinterpreting the Gemara's statement that it's no longer a compliment to the importance of breakfast, but a compliment to the notion of girsa diankusa, the learning of the youth, the learning of young. And let me point out that maybe this is another point to be made here. The notion that Torah improves midos is even when you don't remember what you learned. It's the process of Yegiya b'Torah. Now, sometimes a person might forget. But even if your brain forgets the information, the reishim, the impression that it made on you, remains in your neshama. That's one of the reasons why the Gemara says, if a Talmid Chacham has forgotten his learning, let's say through dementia, Alzheimer's, you are still mechuyev to honor him. And the Gemara has a beautiful raya to this. Because in the Aron HaKodesh were not only the second luchos that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down after the Chet HaEkel on Yom Kippur, but even the first luchos were in the Aron. Now the first luchos were smashed to bits, and all the letters flew off. So it's like a Talmud Chacham that forgot everything. Even if you forgot everything, you have to honor him, because even the Shivrei luchos are in the Aron HaKodesh with the luchos. I think Gemara in Bava Basra says the luchos, the second luchos, were on top of the broken fragments, the Shivrei luchos. But why? Why should I honor a guy because he once was Talmud Chacham, etc.? So the answer is because what the Torah made him didn't really go away. He absorbed all sorts of knowledge, and the knowledge isn't there anymore. But it affected his neshama. His neshama is a holier neshama. The midos, that didn't go away. That didn't go away. Of course, people ask a kasha like this. People ask a kasha, well, if that's the case, all of us were Talmidei Chachamim before we were born. Before we were born, the Malach taught us the whole Torah. Okay, I'm born, I get hit on the mouth, I forget it. But you should honor me. I should honor you because, well, in a way, maybe that's the answer. I mean, everybody honors it. There's no priority here. But the question is, should I, honor a person even though he doesn't remember his learning and doesn't learn at all because he once learned? So there's a big nafkamina. That's why the Gemara said the notion that the Torah elevates you is when you work on it. The Torah you learned before you were born, there was no work. It was just given to you as a matana. So that doesn't get you the covet. That doesn't get you the transformation. But the Torah that comes through the Yagiyah, that actually transforms you. The truth is, in dementia generally, dementia, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but all the different types of impairments of people. Usually elderly, sometimes, even young people, sometimes rarely can actually get Alzheimer's and the like. But it's interesting that even if they forget their true nature, if they develop a certain midah, that midah often remains. I had an aunt who was a very, very dear, sweet, good person. And like the last 5 years of her life, she was kind of, had dementia. And her granddaughter was taking care of her. And out of the blue, the granddaughter wanted to bring her and her aunts, my aunts, her grandmother, my aunt, to our house for Rosh Hashanah. And my aunt had no idea who I was. She didn't recognize me. She didn't know me, even though we had been very close. She didn't know me. But the same kindness that she always had, like setting the table and offering food, and all of those midos were still there. Even though I was a stranger to her, I was not anyone she knew. At least it seemed that way. You never really know that either. But the midos of chesed and kindness and achnasas orchem, these were midos that remained even when everything else went away. So you see that the midos tovos of a person can remain even if the cognition, the rational thinking, is not always going to be there. So that's why we have to honor a Talmid Chacham, even if he's forgotten his learning. Okay? The Gemara, in fact, the Gemara says about Rav Yosef, remember a few times, that Rav Yosef, one of the great Amoraim, Chola, he was sick, and he forgot his learning, and apparently sometimes he would say things, and Abaye would correct him. Abaye was his Talmud. Now the Gemara doesn't describe what type of illness, but presumably it was some type of probably early onset dementia, because Rav Yosef continued to teach. In all of the cases where Rav Yosef forgot his learning, it's not that he was sitting at home. I mean, he said something, and Abaye said, "Oh, you had told us something else." But it could very well have been some early onset dementia, and the Gemara still says that one had to be machabed Rav Yosef, even if he made those mistakes. Okay. Yeah, so that's the interpretation of Girsa the Yankusa. And therefore, tzarech lechanchem biyaldusam lilmod l'shem shamayim. V'al yashkiach ala oimrim ki anar ein tzarech lezeh chas v'shalom. So this is very, very interesting, and we have to know how to balance this. The Gemara says, when you're mechanech a child to learn, you try to be mechanech the child to learn l'shem shamayim, to serve God. And he says, not like the people that say, kids don't have to have that type of motivation. Now, l'chari, there is a problem. I mean, the Rambam himself says in Ohr Somayach that often with children, maybe even with adults, you got to have these external motivations, prizes, candy, allowance, money. This is what you do, right? You say, if you learn, you'll get to whatever it is, you'll get to go to the amusement park, or you'll get ice cream or something. And the Rambam says these are the ways you motivate children, and this is nichlal in mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, that initially you learn shelo lishma for ulterior motives, and then eventually it brings you to a better place. This is makubal, this is very well accepted, and again the Rambam brings it, and even the Gra brings it elsewhere. But here the Gra says that even when they're young, you try to steer them in the direction of l'shem shamayim. So I'm just thinking out loud, does the Gra mean like don't offer the candy, don't offer the soda, tell the kid you got to learn because this is God's will and you're serving God? The kid's not going to do it. So I think the key is that the Gra is moda, I think, that you got to put in these motivations. But in putting in the motivations, you also want to send another message. It's, yeah, listen, we want you to be motivated, so we'll give you a prize, but you should also know that this is how you become close to Hashem. This is how you serve Hashem. This is how you love Hashem. Which means side by side with the external motivations, you try to couple it with learning l'shem shamayim. So you plant a certain seed, and then the hope, no guarantees, that aspect will grow more and more and more dominant, and maybe overpower the other aspect. But again, I'm just suggesting, I don't think the Gra is denying the need we have for those external motivations. I mean, listen, even when we're older, we have external motivations. Maybe they're more sophisticated. So when I'm little, I'll learn because I'll get some candy. When I'm older, I'll learn so I'll get 100 on a test. When I'm a little older, I'll learn so I'll get a position as a market share. Whatever it is, there's always these external motivations that a person has, but at least he should also have some she'ifah, some yearning that this should be part of Avodas Hashem. Okay, again, I apologize. I said I do have to leave early. I think we're going to stop now, but have a good Shabbos.